Poised for Exit is a show for business owners who want to achieve a successful exit based on their own terms. Your business exit will likely be the biggest financial transaction of your life, and for most, you'll have one shot at doing it right. The topics and guests we feature and the stories they share will provide valuable ideas and strategies to improve operations and grow enterprise value so you can achieve the best possible exit outcome. Now here's your host, award-winning certified exit planning advisor, Julie Keys.
Welcome everyone to the Poised for Exit podcast show. Our guest today is an attorney and partner in a firm whose primary clients are business owners. We're going to hear some interesting stories and great advice from him right after these messages.
Thinking about selling your business in the next few years? Don't wait to start planning. I've seen too many business owners wait too long and regret it. Freedom Financial Partners are financial advisors who specialize in exit planning for business owners, helping you reduce tax surprises, protect what you've built, and quantify how much you need from the sale. Their proven process helps you think beyond your business so you can move forward with clarity and confidence. The longer you wait, the fewer options you may have. Download your free financial readiness assessment today at ffpforme.com/exit. That's ffpforme.com/exit.
My name is Todd Crow, and I'm the president of the Twin Cities Exit Planning Chapter. If you're a business owner and advisor and want to learn more about the world of exit planning, you're invited to visit the Twin Cities chapter of the Exit Planning Institute. You can expect top-level education delivered by subject matter experts at every monthly meeting. Grow your network and draw from the learning that could be a game changer for your business or your practice. There's no pressure to become a member, so come and see what the buzz is all about. Our meetings are held the second Wednesday of the month, 7:30 to 9 a.m. See the show notes for more information and registration links.
Are you a business owner getting ready to transition? If so, I recommend True North Mergers and Acquisitions as your confidential strategic partner. They understand your business sale isn't just about one buyer and the price, but what you net that counts. In other words, what you get to keep. When you're ready for a higher level of representation that delivers consistent results, contact True North M&A to do the heavy lifting of selling your business. Learn more at tnma.com. That's tnma.com.
Exiting your business is a big deal, both financially and emotionally. I'm John Marquet, Certified Exit Planning Advisor with TrustPoint. We help business owners transition smoothly on their terms. Our focus is on maximizing value, minimizing stress, and giving you confidence in what's next. Whether you're selling or passing the torch, we make the process seamless. Start planning today at trustpointinc.com. That's trustpointinc.com.
Hello, Poised for Exit listeners. We're here today with James Olsen, who's a partner at Seiler Law. James, welcome to Poised for Exit.
It's Julie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I enjoy seeing you at different events, and you're working with some clients of mine right now who think you're doing such a great job. And I don't get enough legal perspective on this show, so I was really happy when you agreed to jump in and do an interview with me.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah, I like to start all the interviews that I have with just asking people, how did you get to where you are? Like, what was the path that you took to become a lawyer?
Mine was a bit roundabout. I don't have any lawyers in my family, didn't think about law at any capacity growing up, all the way through undergrad. It was actually, when I started thinking about law school, I was working in manufacturing over in Oxford, England for Siemens. So I was building MRI scanners and had some mentors over there that were trying to get me to look at grad school. And so I was looking at my MBA and trying to figure out, can I do an online program? What was I going to do? And I think it was my dad actually he used to teach MBA programs at Michigan State and Seattle Pacific University and the business side. And he said, everybody's doing their MBA, you might want to look at get a law degree. And so that kind of laid a seed that germinated and ended up following that path and found myself in law school. I did have some doubts at one point and left law school briefly and came back. But yeah, that's kind of how I got there. I studied film in undergrad. So my path just generally has been kind of all over the place, going from studying film in undergrad to being an engineer, or not engineer, but building MRI scanners and doing the electrical components of that and my job title as a film major was Terminator. So that job title was a great job title for someone of my background. But yeah, never planned on going to law, but it's been a wild journey since.
So when you were in your undergrad program with a film, was it filmmaking or acting or?
It was media studies, so it was more film theory. I had an interest in making film, but where I was for university, I ended up at University of Washington. I was planning on going to a different school for broadcasting and film, and then some stuff happened with their application process, and they had me as two of the same people at the same address. And, when I found that out, I was like, okay, I think I'll go this other route. And so I went to University of Washington. And they didn't really have a filmmaking program. So I did, film theory and Italian as a minor in communications. And, I had a teacher in high school that taught film history and film theory. So I thought maybe I'll go into doing that at that time. So obviously never pursued that path.
But you also represent some people in the entertainment industry, right? In addition to doing
Yeah, the film side has taken root in the legal process or in the legal career. I had a point at which I was thinking I was practicing and I was struggling with just doing contracts all day and not really loving it and at the time. And so I had an opportunity to go to LA and learn some of the entertainment side of things, which obviously as a film major had an interest for me. And so pursued that and started incorporating that into the practice. And it gave a little different twist to what I was doing. And I've really enjoyed that part of it as well.
Awesome. I have some performers in my family. That's another discussion for another day, though, for us. But let's talk about M&A and let's talk about Seiler Law. You guys work with a lot of business owners, like I said in the beginning of the show. And maybe just talk a little bit about the practice areas that you guys specialize in there. And then more specifically, maybe your own when it comes to M&A and some of the things you're seeing.
Yeah, so we are primarily a business transactional firm. We do other areas in that, but a lot of our work ends up being with small, mid-sized businesses and helping in being general outside counsel for them, helping draft their contracts, negotiate contracts, employment matters, real estate matters. We kind of all over the place with those businesses. And then a big focus of that part of our practice is also the M&A side and helping those owners sell or our clients buy. And so we do a lot of that work. Usually, I would say our typical clients are more Main Street. They tend to be 15 million and below. Our capacity to go above that is, we have that, but that tends to be our main client is that range.
There's a lot more of them, right?
Yeah. And then in the practice, we've also, as we spoke about earlier, I've got the entertainment law side of the practice. That tends to be I'd say the M&A business transactional is about 60% of my practice, and then the entertainment's about another 30%, depending on the time of year. And then the other 10% is estate planning and miscellaneous. And one of our partners does more estate planning as well.
Awesome. Would that be Scott or another partner?
That's Jason. So Scott's more the employment law guru and the M&A and all that. And Jason's working his way into more of the estate planning focus. We all do a lot of the business transactional M&A, and then we all have our little niches. And so Jason's is the estate planning, mine's the entertainment, and Scott's is the employment within those areas.
Yeah, Scott's been on the show, but it's been a while. So we'll have to have him back on again in the future.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when it comes to M&A, like what are some of the things that you're seeing, like pitfalls that are common with sellers? We're being told, right, that 2026 is going to be a great M&A year. And maybe it is. We know that there are still a lot of boomers out there that haven't exited and need to. And whatever I can do to prevent them from just having a liquidation, I'm going to do. But some of them still will. But let's maybe just share a couple of stories, some things that you're seeing and common things that could be prevented.
I think, one thing I'm seeing now is I've got a manufacturing company at the moment that a lot of their contracts are not really contracts. It's a purchase order, or it's, they've done deals on handshake deals for years. And so, when we have to disclose what are the contracts going to be transferred and what are the things that, like, what's in those contracts and is there anything preventing that from moving forward? It's a little harder because we can't really point to a clause and say, yeah, here we can transfer the contract to you, no problem. So I think some of that, in that there are a lot of businesses that probably run on handshake deals and relationships these days, and especially in the smaller businesses. And that's how it used to be. You used to be able to run on that more frequently. And so making sure that, okay, we've had these long-standing agreements, but I'm now transferring ownership to someone else that hasn't had that relationship. So how do I make sure that they feel comfortable with that transfer, and how do I make sure that those agreements actually do transfer, right? So maybe papering up those contracts, maybe making sure that you actually have foundational documents, an operating agreement, or things like that specify who owns the company and how do you complete some of these transactions and how do we approve them, right? So does it need to be unanimous? Does it need to be 2/3? All that kind of stuff. So, I think really getting your paperwork and your foundational pieces in order prior to starting the process, which, you help them think through a lot of these things. So that is, I think, key in helping prepare and making sure that it's ready for sale, right?
Yeah. I mean, getting it set up properly from the get-go. And I'm sure that you've seen this many times where, partners are like, yeah, we'll get to the documentation later. We need to get moving and get this business off the ground. And then all of a sudden there's a dispute between partners and there's nothing documented, or what they do have is really ambiguous, right?
Yep. And then you're going by state statutes, and that might not be how you want to operate.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that handshake situation, I've run into that with clients before, whether it's a customer arrangement or client arrangement that they have with special pricing or volume discounts or whatever, or even with suppliers, right? Or leases with property or, equipment or real estate. It probably runs the gamut.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, and depending on the kind of business it is, I mean, there can be other issues that, like, I've got one now that there's a vault, like a sewer vault underneath the property that, everybody says leave it alone, all the plumbers and everybody else that have closed it off. But then you look at some of the state statutes and some of the stuff you have to disclose and figure that out, and how you properly document that with local authorities. And it's just a weird real estate issue that you wouldn't think would happen. But, as we dig into these things, it's like, okay, well, we do actually have to take care of this properly, or get the other party to sign off on they're comfortable with how you've dealt with it, and they will deal with it, and then the liability shifts to them. And so, just thinking through who's gonna be responsible for what pre and post closing, and how much is the seller going to be attached to post closing,
Sure.
that they might not have thought about before.
Do you represent more sellers than buyers, or is it about even?
It's kind of interesting. I'd say on the whole, I do some dual work. So I do represent both parties in some of those transactions when I work with some brokers. But I'd say on the whole, mine typically end up being sellers, and then the Scots end up being buyers. It's an interesting mix in the firm.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's worked out that way, but that's just kind of been the sellers tend to find me, and the buyers tend to find Scott. So,
well, I think word gets out, right? And yeah, I never really pursued any kind of industry specialty at all in my work. I'm still agnostic, but I do tend to have a lot of clients in the trades, which is great.
Yeah.
I love my clients in the trades, and manufacturing. But yeah, I mean, they just kind of come to you, and which is great. Now, from a buyer's perspective, I just had a conversation recently with a client who is thinking about the due diligence around the buyer. So you've got a seller who's like, okay, well, I have to go through this due diligence process, but then what do I do to vet the buyer? And so let's talk about that for a minute or two.
Yeah, and that same manufacturing company I was talking about earlier, we got the same question. They said, look, they're doing due diligence. Like, what do we need to do for them? There's only so much you can do to an extent, but you can look up their business and their history and see, there are public records. Have they been in lawsuits about things, right? Do they buy companies and then have post-closing issues? That's something you can least try to figure out.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because
Good
if there's a
advice.
history of post-closing issues, then you should be aware that there might be an issue with post-closing for you, right? Or
Yeah.
you have to draft to really prevent that. Yeah, I've had, you can put, from the lawyer's perspective, you can put things in the agreement like, solvency, the company is solvent and they have the ability to buy all those things. I have put that in agreements before, which I found interesting. It was a childcare center that was getting sold to a big company, and I put that in there just as a precaution, and it blew the deal up with that company because they were offended that I put something that says that they can afford to buy the thing in there. I think there were other issues too, but it was kind of like the last straw, and they said, "Are you serious? We're a $1 billion company. Why would you ask us to do that?" I said, "Well, if you're a $1 billion company, why are you squawking at putting it in there? Like, it shouldn't be an
Exactly.
issue." So there are things like that you can put in there. You can, I think, with one that I've got going on now, they're trying to figure out, is it a culture fit, right? Like they've worked very closely with this buyer to make sure that they're comfortable in their space. It's a restaurant, so they're trying to figure out, do they mesh with my employees and can they run the thing well? And so trying to figure out from an interactive perspective, are they a good culture fit for this space? Because then you also might be staying on as the seller, right? And
Yes.
as an employee for a little bit to try to
Right.
help out. So you're going to be working for them. So you want to make sure that you're not going to be butting heads over and over again.
Yeah, that's a question that I ask clients all the time. If you are going to stay on, in what capacity are you going to stay on? What are your non-negotiables? And how do you feel about answering to somebody else when you used to be in charge of everything?
Well, and you have to think, okay, what's the timeline for that? Because I know one
Yeah.
guy that he had a buyout, and yeah, he was supposed to stay on and help them for 2 years, and he got a large salary for doing so. But 3 months in, he was like, "I'm not providing any value. Like, I'm not doing anything. So how
Yeah.
do I have to just keep going to work and not doing it? How do I get out of this? Or how do I, you know, tell them, hey, you can keep paying me, but I don't really. There's nothing you need me to do here."
Hmm.
I've got one right now that they part of the deal is going to be an earnout, so they're going to be working there for 2 years, but they don't ultimately have control over how. I mean, they have an impact on the sales, but they don't have ultimate control as to what's going to happen for marketing and how to push the deals through and all that.
Hmm. So when it comes to earnouts, that's most sellers they don't really want an earnout, but sometimes they don't have a choice. In what situations would you say a seller could expect an earnout?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think maybe where there's a little bit of concern where is the industry going to be stable? Like, are the
Sure.
sales going to keep going the way they are? Like that, for instance, the one that I just spoke about, it's manufacturing, right? So there's obviously some concern with tariffs and what are all these things going
Sure.
to happen? What's the projection for next year? I mean, it should keep going up, but one never knows. Do they lose a couple key clients because the owner leaves? That could have
Hmm.
an impact.
Right.
But obviously, if the owner's still there in some capacity, that helps alleviate that perhaps, but it helps that transition to a new owner for the customers. But so I think it's a risk mitigation for the buyer, right? To say, we think your projections are correct. We're
Hmm.
not sure. So we're going to attach a little bit of the pricing to an earnout. And, I suppose the seller, in this instance, they initially wanted the earnout to be a reduction piece. So the ultimate purchase price would be reduced if the earnouts weren't hit. And then we had to, we finagled the purchase price a little bit so that rather than it being a reduction, it's a true like earnout. And this one was interesting because I mean, it's not, it's thrown into the promissory note, but so it reduces the promissory note total if the earnouts aren't earned. So it's a little
Interesting.
different. It's a little different twist on what typically would happen, right?
Sure. What percentage did the seller have to carry on that?
I think they're carrying about 20%,
20%.
15%.
Sure. Did they do SBA?
I don't think they're doing SBA.
Uh-huh.
So
Interesting. Yeah, just it's good to know. I think for our listeners, it's just good for them to know like what kind of deal structures are out there right now. And so let's talk a little bit about 26 before we wrap up here, James. When we think about the new year coming, what kind of expectations do you have, or does the firm have? What are you thinking is around the corner?
I mean, you mentioned earlier, 2026 looks good. I mean, at this point, I've had my December's been crazy. I've had 7 deals that were supposed to close mid-December through. They were all supposed to close by January 2nd. Now some are getting pushed off to mid-January, late January. But that's a pretty large December for me. 7 deals coming. So December and January are moving fast. I've got more coming in already for January. So,
Great.
I think, and again, because I do the dual rep piece, that sometimes brings me some of the smaller deals that some attorneys won't handle. And so the smaller deals seem to be moving pretty fast right now. I spoke to Scott earlier, and his thought was mid-market to larger are going to be kind of bigger for 2026. And he's, from his end, as the buyers, he's seeing more of a slowdown on his end for the smaller pieces, or the smaller market. But again, that one's been pretty steady for me.
Sure.
As a firm, we're in the process of building out a tool that helps bankers and brokers and people like you providing value prior to selling for the client in evaluating, okay, here are the documents we have, here's what we're looking for a sale price, what are our risks, and on the legal document side, and how do we shore up our business to make sure that it's ready to sell. So
Awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so we're hoping that that takes off, and we're kind of like 80% ready to launch it out and get some feedback. So obviously you will be one that I float it to and see what your thoughts are on that. But
Absolutely. No, that sounds great. That sounds great. Yeah, I think some of the smaller companies we might see more roll-ups, right? Bolt-ons, whatever you want to call them, in 2026 for some of the companies that really do need to sell, and it's a strategic buy. So
yeah,
yeah, so we'll just keep a pulse on that. And I just really appreciate you being on the show, James. It's been great talking with you and sharing your expertise with our audience. And we'll make sure to have your contact information in the show notes, as well as LinkedIn. And I'm sure that our listeners will appreciate this episode.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on. And I just want to give a huge thank you to our listeners from across the US and around the globe. You really do make this show possible. It's amazing to me how long the show's been around and how I still hear comments from people from everywhere about how much they love this show. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your comments. And please do join us again next time. Happy holidays.